There's currently only one day left until Brexit is set to happen on January 31st. So last week we discussed what's going to change for Brits in the aftermath of Brexit. We covered the rights of UK citizens to travel, work and migrate to the rest of the EU, as well as Brits' access to EU universities and funding. In this video we're going to be taking the opposite view. What changes for EU citizens after Brexit? We'll also go into more detail about what EU citizenship is, as well as explaining the EU settlement scheme and how it affects EU citizens. If you like our EU videos and want to see more content on EU institutions, their laws and what's happening in member states, then we'd love your support. We've set up a Patreon page for TLDR EU, and you can get a whole bunch of perks as well as supporting the channel. If we hit our first milestone, we will guarantee at least 2 videos per week on the channel, so go lend us a hand and help us create more content. Oh, and also as a treat for February, all of our $10 and up patrons will get an exclusive limited edition gold EU pin badge. More information about that and the Patreon page can be found linked down below. So, firstly, what is EU citizenship? EU citizenship is a fundamental right for every citizen of an EU member state, and it's additional to national citizenship. So, a person from Germany is both German and an EU citizen. Being an EU citizen grants you a set of rights that you may exercise. One of the most important ones is the right to free movement, to live, work and travel within the EU and any member state. As well as that, EU citizens have the right to move between member states and stay for up to 3 months. All you need to do is show a valid ID card or passport. EU citizens can't be denied entry unless they pose a credible threat to public policy, security or health. As well as right to free movement, EU citizens must be treated no differently than other nationals. So a German living in Portugal must be treated like any other Portuguese citizen. This also covers things like social advantages paid by the government or requirements for job applications. That's because a level playing field is essential for the functioning of the internal market, and key to this is workers being able to work anywhere they want. After 3 months, EU citizens may be asked to apply for a permit, but they can only be denied such a permit if they're not working, self-employed or temporarily unemployed after having worked or studied. Also, a country can't withhold any benefits a member state grants its own nationals, nor can a member state decide its own rules about whether or not you're allowed to stay longer. If you think these EU citizenship rights are far-reaching, then you're right. They're meant to be far-reaching and allow people to move freely within the EU in order for the single market to function. But that doesn't mean that these rights aren't contested. There have been plenty of heated debates against some of these rights, and it's easy to see why this topic was so relevant in a Brexit campaign focused on control, especially control over immigration. For instance, some complain that it's unfair to expect countries to pay welfare to non-nationals, or claim that freedom of movement affects the job prospects of unemployed local workers. Partly because of these issues, Brits voted to leave the European Union back in 2016, and once the UK has left the Union, this freedom of movement right no longer applies to the UK, meaning Europeans will for the first time in years have to request permission to remain in the United Kingdom. Both the UK and EU are acutely aware of this and have been prioritising the protection of citizens' rights. Nevertheless, the text in the withdrawal agreement has been a cause for concern among EU nationals living in the UK. The agreement reads as follows. The host state may require Union citizens to apply for new resident status. The key word here is apply. Post-Brexit, an EU citizen in the UK or UK nationals in the EU will be required to do something to confirm their right to remain. It's no longer an automatic process. The right of EU citizens to remain in the UK has been guaranteed by the EU settlement scheme. The EU settlement scheme is the UK's way of implementing part of the withdrawal agreement that guarantees citizens' rights. All EU, EEA and Swiss citizens resident in the UK who wish to continue living in the United Kingdom beyond the 30th of June 2021 must apply to the scheme. An exception only exists for those who already have permanent residence and have what's called indefinite leave to enter remain, or who are British or Irish citizens. It's worth noting that although the UK is leaving the EU on the 31st of January, these applications only need to be completed by the end of June 2021. This means that ultimately very little will change for EU citizens until the transition period is over and then July 2021 rolls around. It's also worth highlighting that being born in the UK does not necessarily make you British. With the notable exception of the USA, most countries grant nationality based on the nationality of your parents. Hence, people born to non-British parents from somewhere else in the EU may have to apply for new residence status, despite having lived in the UK all of their lives. To apply, you'll need a valid ID like a passport or national ID card. If you have a biometric passport or ID card and a phone with NFC, you can do it all from home on the EU Exit ID document check app. After scanning your biometric passport or ID card in the app, the only things you'll need to add are your national insurance number, address, and contact details. If you can't use the app because your phone doesn't have NFC or your documents aren't biometric, you'll have to do the application by post. Once you've completed the application, the government will check to see if you've had 5 years of continuous residence in the UK. If they can verify this, then you'll be granted the settled status automatically. However, if they can't, as was the case with one TLDR team member, the Home Office will ask for more documents within a certain time frame. These can be anything from bank statements to bills, and there's a full list of accepted documents on the government's website. If an EU citizen can't prove that they've been living in the UK for 5 years, or they haven't yet been in the UK for 5 years, they won't be asked to leave. Instead, they may get pre-settled status, safeguarding their rights until their stay in the UK amounts to 5 years, after which time they'll be eligible to apply for settled status. In essence, there's no direct or immediate change until the transition period ends. Citizens retain their right to live, work and study in the UK, as well as retaining access to public funds if they're eligible. There's also no change to employment restrictions, nor to entitlement for NHS healthcare. Also, those with settled status don't have to stay in the UK forever. They can spend up to 5 years in a row outside of the UK without losing their status. And in the case of Europeans with pre-settled status, they can spend 2 years outside the UK. Essentially though, EU citizens living in the UK have about 18 months to apply for settled status. So for now, despite the Big Ben bongs, prime ministerial speeches, and Parliament Square parties, not a whole lot changes. At least, not for now. So what do you think of the EU settlement scheme? Do you think it will ensure a smooth transition for the many EU citizens who are currently worried? And do you think that the EU citizenship rights that Brits currently hold will be missed by the people of the UK? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. Be sure to subscribe to this channel for more EU updates, including on Brexit.